like it was like everywhere. It was like this loudest voice. I can't really even describe it. It was just like powerful. It was like a vibration.
Hmm.
And just the gap between each word, this stops now. And then everything just sped back up again. And it was just like watching a movie.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was just probably one of the most profound moments of my life, because I knew in that instant, God is real. He's real.
All I could see was this light coming at me.
The Holy Spirit went, it blew into me.
I have never been the same since then.
That was it. I'm done.
I was born again.
Welcome to the Weird Christian Podcast. I am your host, Samuel Delgado, and this is episode 55. I interview Meredith Swift about her autobiography, From New Age to New Creation. So, of course, this is her story of her coming out of New Age, and we get into a little bit of everything. We talk about séances, past lives, her experience with abortion and an abusive marriage, hearing the voice of God, and ultimately how God heals everything. So, with no further ado, let's get weird. Welcome. I am just delighted to say that you are my first international guest on the show.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Samuel. Yes, I'm from Australia, as you might be able to tell from my accent. Yeah.
And, I had to look. I think I actually, I can see on analytics sometimes where my listeners are listening from. We've had some Australian listeners before. I'm sure there'll be more now that you're the guest. So welcome. I did not actually realize that you were in Australia when I called you initially. So it's kind of a funny story. The reason why it worked out for this time is because it's 6 in the evening for me, and it's 9 a.m. in the morning for you.
Yeah.
And I realized that when I called you at 6, and so I thought, well, let's just stick with this time if it works. Anyway, so why don't we start out just by hearing a little bit. We're going to be talking about your book, which is autobiographical. So we're really going to hear your incredible story. So just give us a little bit of background on who you are, and then tell us how you grew up and how you came to know Christ.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Meredith, and I live in a town called Townsville in North Queensland, a long way from where I actually grew up. So I grew up in another state of Australia called Victoria, in a small farming community. So I'm a farm girl originally. And I grew up in a family, 5 kids, my mum and dad. So my mum was a nurse, my dad was a farmer. And my mum used to take us to church. My dad was an atheist, but mum used to take us to church, but really didn't know or think about Jesus so much as about God. And I used to wonder about God when I was a little girl. Who was he? Where was he? What could he do? And I used to daydream about God actually, but never really thought about Jesus. So during my childhood, I was very much interested in, the darker side of life, I would say. So I had a real fascination for, things like the spirit world, vampires, séances, all of that sort of things. So because I really had no...
Let me ask, where do you think that fascination came from? Do you have a family history of that, or was that just, something you were introduced to kind of within you?
I think as a kid, I've always had a wondering about the other side of life. I've always believed there was another side to life, but I think the influences came from the sort of TV shows I would watch, because back in the 60s and early 70s when I grew up, there were a lot of TV shows like The Twilight Zone and Night Stalker and things like that. The vampire movies, they used to actually show those movies at my school as an end of year thing. So and I was fascinated with the thought that there was another realm beyond the physical. So that's probably why I was influenced. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up. There was a lot of mental illness in my family. So, very much had to depend on my own resources because my mum was, she had a breakdown and my dad had been through the war, so was quite a depressed sort of person. So I really built this kind of fantasy world that I had of, the spiritual realms. And so as I left school, I moved to a larger city called Melbourne, and I was really searching for community. I was searching for something different to what I'd already known. And I then really stumbled into the New Age, and started exploring things like crystals, alternative healing. I studied to be a therapeutic masseur, really studied that whole mind and body connection, and went into spiritual healing in my own way, went into meditation and yoga and all of those sorts of things. And then so I'm going through my life, and I probably was I was 34 when I had my first child, and my marriage was very dysfunctional, a lot of domestic violence, and my first child was born and she had a disability. So I was still practicing New Age philosophy then, but I began to realise that it wasn't helping me at all. Like I was in a very dark place, and, all my practices of positive thinking and New Age philosophy and, alternative healing, they weren't helping me at all. And I was actually becoming more and more depressed with my marriage as well. It was very depressive. And I started searching for something else. I didn't know what it was. I knew there was a hole in me that couldn't be filled by the New Age and by just saying love and light and positive affirmations, which I was very big in. I didn't have the time really with a special needs daughter and, being in a domestic violence situation to even, do any sort of healing like I was used to sort out my problems. And so, around about, I think I was close to 50 and I changed jobs, and I'd retrained to be a kindergarten teacher, and I changed jobs, and my ex-husband and I went to live, we were back in Queensland. We went to live in the same town as his parents, and his mother was a Jehovah's Witness. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking before I moved, maybe if we go there, I'll find God. I remember thinking that. But his mum, my ex-husband's mum, would witness to me and talk to me about Jehovah's Witness philosophy. And I think, I'm not sure about that. It doesn't really click with me. It just didn't seem like that's what I was looking for. But when I came to Ingham, that's the town that I pretty much settled in, I had changed jobs, and one of the teachers in my new job was a born-again Christian. So she started witnessing to me in a very gentle sort of way. She was, she would talk to me about having a relationship with Jesus, and she got me really thinking about Jesus. She would pray with me, even though I had no intention of becoming a Christian, because I thought, I've done too many things in my life. It's boring to be a Christian. There'll be no more fun, like all those sort of things, which, feeling depressed, I did want to have fun and I did want to do things that were enjoyable. And to me, Christianity wasn't any of that. That was the Christianity I grew up with. You sit in the pew, you listen to the minister, you have to wear your white hat and your gloves, and you have to do the right thing, whatever that is. So my friend started witnessing to me, and then one day she said, do you want to come home for a cup of tea? And I was really scared. I kind of knew that if I went to her place, something was going to happen. I sensed it. So anyway, I said, yeah, okay. So we went to her house, and she said, do you want to pray the prayer and receive Jesus? And I was, thinking, what difference is that going to make, So
Wow.
I said, okay, I will. So I was really scared. And I realized now, it was probably the enemy that was putting that fear into me, because I had no reason to be scared. We're just praying a prayer, right? So we prayed the prayer, and my friend Jean, she said, do you feel different? And I said, well, no, not really. I don't feel anything at all. So anyway, she said, well, she said, just, we'll keep in touch and see how you're going. Anyway, so on the way home, I remember saying to God, look, if you're real, I want you to show me a sign. And so I got home, and so this was probably 3:30 in the afternoon, and my younger daughter, she came home at about that time, and we were just chatting. She said, oh, Mum, guess what happened to me at school today? And I said, well, guess what happened to me? And then I said, but you first, you tell me. And she said, well, Mum, some people from Gideon's Bibles, and I don't know if you had that, if you have that in America, Gideon's Bibles. Do you have that there?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it sounds, maybe elaborate on what that is, because I know I've heard it before. Yeah,
well, they're people from, it's called Gideon Society, and they leave Bibles in hotel rooms, and they go around to schools and they talk about Christ and accepting Jesus. So my daughter Melissa, she said, these people from Gideon's came, and it was the last part of the school day, so it was about the same time I was at Jean's. She said, oh, and they gave us all a Bible, and there was this prayer in the back, and I said a prayer, and I accepted Jesus. So I thought, so later I think I said to God, well, I guess that you've given me this sign, and that was amazing. And I knew then, God was real. Looking back, I probably wouldn't have asked for a sign from God now, but I did then, and it was perfect for me. So then in my kindergarten class, there was a pastor, and so I started connecting with him and listening to Christian radio as much as I could, and really starting and being mentored by Jean. So I had really good people around me. And I threw out all my New Age stuff, and just that was 12 years ago now. Got baptized. Never thought I'd get baptized. Thought I'm not going to be one of those people who go and get baptized. Like all along, it was like, I'm not going to do that, but I did. Like Jesus was very gentle with me and, helped me along the way. Yeah. So that's pretty much my testimony.
Yeah.
And the title of my book is From New Age to New Creation. So it's about my journey.
Yes.
Out of the New Age into the light. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you just gave us kind of the sweeping summary overview, and you really lay it all out in the book. So for anyone listening that just wants to hear an amazing testimony, if you think that's amazing, just you'll be even more floored when you read the book. It's just unbelievable. It's just interesting story. The life you lived was really interesting. Just to see, how God was able to save you. It's just remarkable. I've never heard anything. I've heard stories where like someone got saved and hey, my spouse or my buddy, they got to get saved too, kind of thing. But the fact that you and your daughter got saved, in two completely different ways at the same time it's it's unbelievable.
Very powerful.
Miraculous.
Yeah, truly miraculous.
yeah, for sure. I love that story. So I want to ask you about your friend Jane. Is that her name?
Jane.
Jane. Okay.
Yeah.
So, here you are, and you're, just deep into New Age, and she's a Christian, and you guys are working together. So, I mean, just on one hand, you see two people with just completely different worldviews. Talk a little bit more about how that friendship and how you guys begin to speak, because, for those that are on both sides, it's just interesting. I love these testimonies where it's really through relationship. So I'm kind of interested to know if you were like attracted to her, or if she was attracted to you, or if there's, a bit of both going on.
Yeah, probably a bit of both, because we worked in a kindergarten, so there was 3 teachers. So one teacher was an atheist, then there was me in New Age, and then this Jean, who's a born-again Christian.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, she was never condemning of the choices that I had made. She was always very gentle. She would ask me what I believed. That was really the starting point. Like, she was very interested in what I believed. And she would take points that I would speak about and she would contrast them with the love of Christ, basically. And she would talk about grace as opposed to the law, and how, you know, the religion that I'd grown up with was probably very much the law, and she would explain that to me. So she would, the door was always open for me to ask her questions about any aspect of Christianity. But, you know, I was attracted to her because she's very practical, but very, very kind. And, yeah, she never condemned me. She never actually tried to change my mind about anything. She just kept giving me information. And she witnessed to me about her own life, because her husband, she's still with him, but early in their marriage, a lot of domestic violence and, you know, a lot of hardship, very close to what I was experiencing. And she got born again, and she was able to witness to him. And while he still isn't saved technically, he actually listened and saw her example, and the violence actually stopped. And so, you know, I thought, well, maybe, you know, Jesus can help me with my marriage. And that was also a point that was very attractive to me, you know. And, you know, when we would pray, we'd pray for my marriage and things like that. So, yeah, the attraction was that she never condemned me. She was genuinely interested in my life and where I was at, and she gave me information. Any sort of aspect or question I had, she would talk to me about that. So she met me where I was at. You know, that's how I could sum it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That spirit of gentleness. I think it's really insightful for the Christian now that she didn't have to like sell you on Christianity. She was just simply a listening ear that was willing to hear what you had to say, which is just a completely different approach than kind of approaching somebody with all the answers, trying to kind of school them on the truth. Not that she held back the truth, but it sounded like she always delivered that in a gentle way, in a way that wasn't threatening to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You also mentioned something that I actually was going to ask you about this. I thought it was kind of funny when I read it in your book. You talked about kind of your perception of Christianity as being as being boring. And you kind of described, you know, kind of where you got that from. So, you know, I'm going to invite you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. And as far as, you know, what did you find out as far as that preconceived notion of Christianity, and then having converted? Was there like a wrestling point where you felt like you had to sort of change who you were? And, you know, kind of how did you kind of wrestle with that preconceived notion after conversion?
Well, let me say, Samuel, that once I converted, I just started experiencing so much joy, and it was anything but boring. But I think my preconception came from my church experience as a little child. And I think it was a feeling of being condemned and not good enough, and that I had to measure up in some way, and that I couldn't have fun because in church everyone was a certain way in the church that I attended. And, you know, relationship with Jesus is all about what he's done for us at the cross, and the grace and the mercy, not so much what we have to do for him, you know, and that we have to be a certain way. And, you know, because I thought Christianity, I would have to be a certain way and that I wasn't acceptable just to be myself, because I was a pretty quirky sort of kid. And I love to have fun. I love to take risks and be adventurous and all of that sort of thing and be brave. And I thought that, as a Christian, I would have to somehow go against who I was and become my idea of being a Christian, which was a faulty idea, because life with Jesus is anything but boring. And I say in the book, it's like going from black and white TV to Technicolor. It's like it just lights up the whole world, seeing the lens through the love of Jesus,
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that, because sometimes, we can kind of stereotype the Christian based on, just our view of it or our experience. And I just love that, you recognize that that's how God made you, and you don't have to somehow conform to even in some cases what people say a Christian should be. Obviously there's a godly way to live, in righteousness, of course, but that idea that the devil's having fun in hell, there's the party, and it's all just sitting on clouds listening to harps in heaven, that nothing could be further from the truth. So that's awesome. So I want to kind of unpack your story a little bit, kind of going back to your childhood. One thing that I thought was really neat was, as you sort of mentioned, you had kind of a fascination with the other side or the other world, however you want to phrase that. But you talked about writing, which is so interesting because you write now, and I think that's so neat that that started at such a young age. What was it about writing that you were kind of always so attracted to? And then I know this book is autobiographical, but do you write fiction as well today?
No, not fiction. Not today. Not so far. The books that I've written so far are all parts of my own life, which God has used for his glory. So like the domestic violence part, my special needs daughter part, my new age testimony, and the first book it's a devotional, which I wrote when my daughter was very, very sick. So they've all been parts of my life. But the reason I think I started writing was because I read a lot. I read so much as a kid. And so my first book I actually wrote, I think I was 14, and it was actually a science fiction book. I wish I still had it. But I remember, I could express myself because I was, like I said, I was a quirky kid. So I had a real adventurous side, but I also had this very introverted side where I'd write things and express myself through stories. And, in my life, Samuel, I've always seemed to fall into things. I've never been a planner. I've never been one of those people who thought, I'm going to do this in 5 years, I'll be here. I always seem to fall into things. And it was like that with writing. My parents bought me a typewriter for my 14th Christmas, when I was 14, my Christmas present. I just started just using this typewriter and writing then. So, and I wrote journals most of my life, except for during my marriage. I couldn't actually write in my journal because my husband would have, if he found my journal, he would have beaten me basically. I stopped for that period of time. But coming back to it, it wasn't planned coming back to writing, because I started writing my books in 2017, and I never planned it. I was actually going to write my new age book first, and then God said, no, I want you to stop that book. And I was really quite devastated. And then as it turned out, when my daughter got sick, he had other plans for me, and I started writing out the communications I was having with him. So, the writing, it was something that has been a constant through my life, but I never actually planned it. But I would say I got into it through reading, lots and lots of reading. Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought that was so neat. that
Yeah.
you kind of had that, because when you're a child, you sort of just, you're so young, you just kind of follow your passions, and it's just neat that for you that was writing, before anyone sat you down and kind of taught you what it was, that you sort of gravitated to that.
Yeah.
And you said you journaled throughout that. Did you write poetry as well?
Yes, I wrote poetry. So when I was 24, I had a breakdown, and my way of healing from that was writing poetry. So, and that was, again, that was something I never planned. I just started writing poetry. But, I believe, Samuel, I believe God has been with me all through my life. And I believe my purpose is to be a writer, to glorify him. And I think he's always been there and always kind of whispered into my spirit without me realizing it. Yeah, to take certain paths and do things with writing.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, you think you wrote about that, as far as you look back at your journal entry, and this was before you got saved, you'd written something that was pretty profound, that kind of displayed what you just mentioned, that really God's Spirit was working in you during that time. Can you share that?
Yeah. So after I had my breakdown, I moved to a small country. I lived in the bush, and I wrote poetry a lot. And I would write in my journal, like pages and pages of stuff in my journal, every little detail pretty much. And I'd written a whole lot of stuff about the new way, different things I was doing. And then I wrote this line. It was just one line, and it said, I thank God for where I am now and for who he is, along those lines. And it was just like this one line that really just stuck out like a sore thumb in the writing. And I look back at that and I thought, wow, and the sort of books that I loved to read when I was a kid, like the Narnia series, and A Wrinkle in Time is another book. And when I look back and reread them, because C.S. Lewis is, amazing apologetic, and there's God all through it. And it's like, I didn't have the eyes to see it then, but it was still there, the presence of God through my life, looking after me and protecting me and helping me without me realizing.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. That's so incredible. Especially just, despite and amongst all the, I don't know, occultism, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you were souped in darkness. And so, I'll kind of begin to unpack that a little bit. But I just think it's so neat that, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, without having to conform, God is using that passion that you have for writing, and he's using it for his kingdom. So, you don't have to fit in a certain box when you become a Christian, or as far as how you can serve your church or, your community. You can use, whatever God's given you as your passion, and you can use it, for the kingdom. So I think that's so neat.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, you, I think you kind of mentioned that in a young age you were kind of fascinated with the other side, and I think you wrote about maybe talk about what were some of the first kind of things you gravitated to as a child to sort of seek communication with the other side.
Yes. So, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but it really wasn't that funny when I look back. My best friend in primary school, we were 12, and there was, we used to be inside at lunchtime because I'd had an accident and I'd hurt my back and I wasn't allowed to go out and play. So my friend Janet and I used to stay inside in the classroom, and there was this little room out at the back, like a storeroom. And I don't know how we did it or why we decided, but we decided we'd start having séances regularly, So I think every lunchtime we would have a séance. And so, we wrote out all the letters, and we had I don't know how we got a glass. Maybe we bought it from home. But, we had it, and we'd ask questions, and, nothing would really happen. But then on this one occasion, the glass just started moving of its own accord and just terrified us. It frightened us out of our wits. So we never had another seance after that, but that was the first thing that I was drawn to. And I probably got that from watching a film or reading a book or something about, seances, and we thought that'd be cool. But that was what I first thought, I want to, see what we can find out from the other side. So it started off as a play thing, but it was very serious. Yeah.
And at the time, did you think that was cool, or did it scare you?
It was really scary. We thought it was cool up until the glass started moving by itself. And then it was really, really, it was terrifying. Yeah. I still remember that fear that we experienced when this glass started moving around by itself. Yeah.
And that really says a lot.
Not something you want to repeat
about it. If you think about, someone that's seeking, and y'all were just kids. I mean, y'all were just basically trying to have some fun. But your first kind of real experience with it, once you got a little taste, the fact that you were so scared that fear came upon you just goes to show you that, one, it's really nothing to play with. And two, it has a dark nature.
Very dark nature. And through my life, there's at least two other occasions where I've actually witnessed demonic activity, and it's just so terrifying and scary. Whereas, playing around with that stuff beforehand, because of how it's portrayed in TV shows and books and things, it's not portrayed as being a scary thing, and the demonic realm as a really terrifyingly dark, powerful force. It's presented in a kind of a lightweight way. That the heroes go in and they slay the demons or whatever, but the fear and the terror that is part and parcel of the demonic realm, that's never portrayed until, it wasn't to us until we actually experienced it firsthand. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because there are movies that depict like a real darkness, but I think people go into it for like a thrill, and they see it as just like fiction, that it's kind of harmless to kind of, consume that type of material.
Yeah, it's entertaining, like to watch it on a big screen, but it doesn't really touch you until you experience it personally.
Sure. And then, some people get their kicks like that, but I know people that they don't fool with it because they can't sleep at night. I mean, just even seeing it, the fear is that real. They kind of take it home.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So one thing that was sort of interesting, you hear a lot about this, like in occultic circles, people that are into New Age are past lives. So what was your experience with that? And then looking back on it now, as a Christian, how do you interpret what was going on when you had this idea of past lives?
Yeah. So again, it was that wanting to be in touch with the spiritual realm and the other side of life. And because I was into alternative healing, part of alternative healing is this notion of past lives, and how as a soul in New Age, you experience a lot of different lifetimes, and each lifetime you experience is for your learning and for that soul to evolve until eventually the soul is perfected, and you don't have any more physical lives. So past life therapy in New Age is about regressing to this past life to give meaning to what you're experiencing in your current life, and to heal whatever, the aspects of that past life are. So to me, being in the New Age, that made perfect sense. I thought, I'm a soul having a physical experience. I've lived many times before, and all of that sort of thing, which now, of course, as a Christian, I don't. We have one life, and that's to glorify God, and we don't have multiple incarnations. That to me now, with scripture backing that up, and just my relationship with Jesus, our one life now is important, and, to make the most of that to glorify God. But past life therapy in New Age makes perfect sense, because, you're this soul who is on its way to being perfected, and reaching this place called nirvana, where, all these perfect beings live, which, New Age is very much, and I write this in the book, it's like a counterfeit of Christianity. It takes elements of Christianity and twists them and counterfeits it. And as Christians, we're living our life here in this fallen world. We're living our life for Jesus, but we're going to be with him in heaven. And that is like our perfect life, in heaven, where he wipes away every tear, and, we're there with him forever. So New Age takes bits of that, of Christianity, and there's a lot of examples I use in the book where that happens, but New Age is the counterfeit. It's the shadow. It's like Satan can't create anything. That is impossible for him to create anything, but he's able to counterfeit things, and he's able to twist things around to make them appear good and loving and like he can appear as an angel of light. And that's the thing. It's like Satan can present as an angel of light. He can present in many different ways to trap people, because if you never know about Jesus, you're on the road to hell without realizing it. Like in New Age, I thought it's all about love and light and good things and beautiful people, but you're on the road to hell because, you don't know about Jesus and the gospel and what he came to do, on earth to save us, to redeem us, and to allow us to live with him through the acceptance of his gift of forgiveness,
Yeah, and I thought that
Does that make sense?
Oh, no, totally. And I thought that was really interesting about your story in particular, is that even though there was darkness, it displays in a way that it doesn't look dark at all. It looks very much like, it was very clear that you had a heart for people and that you want people to achieve healing. And that's really an attractive, that is enticing. There's part of that is attractive, but it's such a deception. It reminded me of, just the serpent in the garden. It said you could be as gods. It's really the same story of, well, and how do you achieve that? It's looking inward, as opposed to what the truth, what we know what Christianity teaches is that, well, no, you have to recognize that you're not perfect. However, there's someone who is perfect, that has taken your place and, made substitution so that you can take his righteousness. So it's a totally different way to view things. And I imagine that's just so liberating, coming out of something like that, to kind of hear that concept of, okay, grace, that
yes,
I'm accepted how I am.
Yes. And New Age, for me, it was very much about striving to be perfect. Whereas when I accepted Jesus, suddenly it was all about, give me your brokenness. I love you. I'll help you. I'll give you my strength. Rest in me. Like to me, it was just like a balm for my soul. All of a sudden, I felt accepted and loved, and that in itself, very healing, so I could stop striving. I could actually rest. When I accepted Jesus.
I really got that impression. It really was a journey. In fact, I took a picture. I wanted to talk about it really seemed like all throughout your life, until you found Jesus, you were seeking and seeking and seeking, and on to the next thing, trying to look for healing. So I took a screenshot from your book of kind of everything that you kind of went to. You mentioned it as a list of alternative healing treatments.
It's a long list.
Can you? Maybe I shouldn't listen. I mean, it's probably about 20 different things. Half the stuff I don't even know what it is.
No, it's just so much.
But yeah, I mean, it's a never-ending thing. It just goes to show you that nothing was truly ever satisfying. You couldn't find any answers, any truth. So it was just, what else can I consume? Just trying to fix that hole. It's incredible to hear you talk about the difference between that and what Christ can provide for you. It's unbelievable. So I want to talk about maybe you kind of deal with some harder topics, but I want to address them because I think it's helpful for those that have had similar experiences. So you talked about your abortion in the book. So maybe share that experience and how have you dealt with that, and what would you say to someone who is either dealt with that before themselves or is in that place where, well, I guess speak to it.
Mm. Well, yeah, it's a hard thing to talk about because I would say it's probably still one of the biggest regrets of my life, that I was never prepared for, the longing for that child afterwards, but at the time I felt very pressured because I wasn't married, I was young, and I felt very pressured to have this termination. And I know I'll meet that child in heaven, I know that, but when I look at that abortion through the lens of being a Christian and being loved by Jesus, it really still horrifies me that I did kill that child, because it is, the child is a child from the moment of conception, and the world, because I wasn't married, because I didn't have stability in the relationship. It just really, it seemed to be an answer, a quick fix, but it's honestly stayed with me. Well, 40 odd years later, it's still with me. And I've done a lot of healing around that, but I still feel deep regret. And looking back now at having that, if I, had that child, I would have been okay. It would have been fine to have that baby. I would have coped. I had people around me, but it was like this worldview of, well, you're not married, you can't have that baby. A lot of shame, of shame. So I understand partly why people have abortions, but at the bottom line, it's God's creation, and every soul that He creates has a plan for their life, and you might not see it. You won't see it then, but like you look at people. I think Tim Tebow is the result of it. His mum tried to have an abortion. It's like, looking back now, I would never have murdered that child. Yeah, and that's what I did.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know I know it's probably difficult to speak about. Did your perspective change after you came to Christ, or was there, because you mentioned shame, was that before and after? I'm just wondering if somehow your perspective was different.
The perspective of the soul was different after I came to Christ. We have one life to be used for God's glory. The shame that I felt was when I was in the world, and just deep regret, always yearning for that child, and thinking about that child. I still do, what would that child have been like, boy or girl, like all those sort of things. But different now because of the enormity of what I actually did, whereas when I didn't know Christ, I felt the shame and so forth, but the enormity and the preciousness of that soul, I didn't understand it. I didn't value it like I would now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't think of, I guess someone from New Age, the concept of the soul would be totally different. So I can see how there would be a shift there. Because it's like New Age says, oh, don't worry, that soul will come back. True. Like minimizing it all. And it's not, it's nothing to be minimized. It's, and it's a scary place to be in. It's a very scary place to be in, but that child, God, if you're pregnant, that God has a purpose. God has a purpose for that child and a plan for their life. And He'll equip you. I believe that. Amen. And speaking to that shame, I know some people feel like they have to kind of clean themselves up, or they're, like God can't save them because their sin is too dark to be saved. Can you speak to that maybe?
Yeah, well, I think I touched upon a little bit before, Samuel. It's just that thing of, I couldn't become a Christian because I'd done terrible things, and having a termination was one of them. And to God, sin is sin. There's no big sin, small sin. It's all sin. We all sin every minute of every day, pretty much. And Scripture speaks to us over and over again about God loves us. He wants to save us. He wants none to be lost. Jesus will go in search of that one sheep. There's nobody perfect, only Jesus. We're all living in this fallen world as sinners. And, sin is sin. So it really doesn't matter what you've done or who you are. God can save you. He can save all of us. He wants to save all of us.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the gospel, is that, is that it's just that different concept of, that's another misconception that people have about Christianity, is that somehow Christians are good people or they're righteous. And if they see someone that's not that, immediately that person's a hypocrite, which obviously we need to strive to be righteous and to reflect Christ. But what you said is profound, is that we can't ever keep from sinning. And that's why we need a savior. And that's the beauty of the gospel, is that we continue to see God's grace even after coming to faith. It's a walk, but it's one that we're not striving to achieve on our own. It's already, it's already done. I noticed you did that in your book, where you didn't put some huge emphasis on justification. You did, of course, have an incredible conversion story, but you put a lot of emphasis, I felt like, on sanctification and, your experience after coming to Christ. So talk about that for a little second, about, here you are, living a life that's in New Age, and you come to Christ. You started listening to the radio. What was that experience like? Is how God was changing you since your conversion?
Well, being in New Age and looking at all the different ways I could be healed, there was lots and lots of that list in the book. But after I came to Christ, and especially started listening to Christian radio, I realised that believing in God, having Jesus in my life, all parts of life can be embraced. So the Christian radio we have here in Australia is called Vision Radio, and they talk about, they have focus on the family, and they have people's testimonies from all walks of life. They have Bible study. They have all sorts of things, and they have all different preachers talking regularly. And so I started to realise that every answer that I was ever looking for outside in New Age, it's actually found in Christ, that He supplies every answer that we need to live in this fallen world. And that was a revelation. Like, I would hear testimonies from people dealing with big stuff, people from, broken backgrounds like mine. And I realized, it was just such a huge, amazing world that I was opened up to. And I actually realized that my New Age view was very narrow, and being in Christ, bigger and bigger every day. Yeah, so radio was a good medium for me, because I could just turn it on and listen to it while I was doing the housework. I could listen to it at night. And, the scripture is, faith comes by hearing. It was a really easy way that I could pack stuff into my life without having to do too much, because I wanted to rest. It's like, and so I could just switch on the radio and be soaked in all this good stuff. Yeah.
I love Focus on the Family. They have such good programming. I think when I started listening to it, James Dobson was still the host. I soaked it all in too. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
What you said reminded me of a verse out of one of Peter's epistles. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness by his own glory and goodness, something like that. But it's incredible that, yes, we can just rest in that, because not only did he do the work in our justification, he's also doing the work in our sanctification as well. So it's really about drawing close to God and him making us a new creation, as opposed to this, let me work, rules. Yes, that's so awesome. Now, this was something I would like you to elaborate a little bit on, because you mentioned, it might have been a couple times you talked about memories. So I have a kind of two questions about that. But you said you had memories of sexual abuse, and then you kind of weren't sure where they came from. Can you talk about that?
As a young child, my dad did a lot of the caretaking of our family because my mum was a nurse and worked a lot of night shift. And during my 20s, I had a lot of, I guess you could call it, well, I had a lot of relationships with men, really, and always seeking sex, not love, but seeking sex. And as I progressed along my journey, for years and years, I didn't really ever have memories about my dad maybe abusing me. But when I came to Christ and I started, healing, I started exploring the possibility of that, and why I wanted sex, not love, from men. And so I still haven't uncovered all of it, but the memories are coming back that my dad abused me, and that's why I had all the sexual dysfunction later in life. Yeah.
And was this at such a young age that you forgot, or was it so traumatic that you forgot?
Probably a bit of both, because I was probably about 10, and I've done a lot of work around trauma and what trauma does, and there's studies around people who've been abused as children, who even if they remember their memories, years later they'll have forgotten them again. Because trauma has that capacity when it happens, and trauma comes in many different ways. It has the capacity to kind of split people. So the memories, because the mind can't cope with what has happened, the mind buries it, puts it somewhere safe, and then the person can function. But the trauma is always there.
Right.
Here in Australia, like the field that I work in, besides my writing, I actually write positive behaviour support plans for people with challenging behaviours. It's a mouthful, but most of the people who have challenging behaviours have experienced significant trauma in their lives, either sexual abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, a dysfunctional family unit. And to some people, a traumatic event won't be so traumatic to someone else, but the point is the trauma happens to the person, whatever the event is that caused the trauma. So we find in this work that so many people who present with these challenging behaviours of, physical aggression and so forth, it has a background of trauma, and you have to take a trauma approach to help people. People have to feel safe in order to heal. And again, that comes back to Jesus. There's no one safer than Jesus to heal. And I don't believe that I really would ever have healed or touched on the sexual abuse the way that I have since I've become a Christian, because Jesus is the ultimate healer and is the ultimate safe person to go to, And I've done a lot of healing, Christian counseling where, I meet Jesus and talk to him and speak to him and heal memories. I've done a lot of that. So.
I love so much that you're speaking of God as a healer, because I think so many times when we hear God as a healer, we think of physical healing, and we don't necessarily associate that. I know I my mind goes there. I don't necessarily think of the emotional healing that God does as well. So that's fantastic. I'm curious because you mentioned you had access to some memories undergoing Christian counseling. How was it that you were able to recall and access those memories?
Well, the Christian counsellor that I go to here in Townsville, he has a process where, you talk a little bit at the beginning about, what you're there for, what you want to have help with. And then he takes you, it's like to a room and the memory just comes, whatever the memory is supposed to come, that will come. And it's like he brings Jesus in, and Jesus and myself, we would talk. And I mean, that's my experience. Someone else, it might be different for the Christian counselling, but it's a very easy, it's a very organic process. And I find that with my walk with Jesus, that what I think might need healing, if I trust him, he reveals things at just the right time. So it's about being open to the healing going in the way that he wants to go in, because he knows all about us, and some things are there for later, there for when we're ready through him. So does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I was just thinking, by saying what you just said, you expose New Age so much, because I remember reading your book, so much of what you spoke about and what you worked with and what you dedicated so much of your time and life to was healing. So much so, I mean, you're looking for inner healing for yourself and for others. You're, leading others to try to lead them to inner peace and healing. And of course that came from a good place, but it just shows that even someone that would be looked at as a healer, someone you go to learn about healing and to receive healing, to say that you as a Christian received healing from Christ really exposes just the deception that you were in.
Yeah. And while you're feeling good about things, because when I would go to healing as a New Ager, I would feel great momentarily, and then it would be like, feel worse, and I would be striving to find the next fix, which that's the list in the book, all the types of modalities there are, and coming to Christ, he's the creator. He knows everything about it. He knows we're fearfully and wonderfully made. He knows the amount of hairs on our head. He knows everything about us, and it just makes so much sense to allow him to be the healer and to work through people who know Christ and that he can direct things in our lives. But it comes back to trust. I think, Samuel, for me, really, I came to a point where I just said to Jesus, and this was when my daughter was sick, but it was one of the most profound moments of my life. I remember saying, I was in bed at night and praying, and I said, I don't know why you're doing this, but I'm going to trust you, and I really just gave it to God in that moment, and it's like this big weight just fell off me. Making that decision to trust him and trust his process, because, I came to the end of myself, and I'm getting better at it now, realizing when I'm at the end of myself, to just give it to him and let him do it in his strength, that I actually don't have to do it in my strength, because I was always someone who I thought, I can do it, I can fix this, I can, and that comes back to the dysfunction and the trauma in my life, because I built a big wall around myself and decided, well, I can do it. I made myself my own God, really. I can do it. I can find the answers. I can fix things. And more of my Christian walk has been about realizing I can't fix anything. I actually can't do things in my own strength. I've got Jesus to do that for me and to help me and to be with me. And that's a beautiful realization. That's just like taking a deep breath out. It's a great thing.
Yeah, it's living water. It's fantastic.
Yes.
So I want to speak. You have an incredible story. It's another hard topic. You mentioned you were in an abusive marriage, and speak to. And you've already spoken a little bit as far as trauma, but speak about the marriage and how did God redeem that?
Okay, so I was married on and off for 20 years to a man with a lot of mental health challenges, very abusive in every way, pretty much. I would leave him and he would always track me, and I've got 2 daughters, track us down and say that he was going to change and so forth. Anyway, I came to a point so marriage ended in 2011, and we moved up to Ingham in 2006, and I made the decision, and this is before I came to Christ, that I'm never going to get away from this man. He's always going to track me down, and I remember feeling absolutely hopeless. I just thought, well, this is my life. I might as well make the most of it and try to deal with it. So when I came to Christ, for the first year, I had to keep it a secret from my ex-husband. So I was, me and my younger daughter, we were doing a Introducing God course with our pastor, and my older daughter, who has a disability, she would be in respite while we did that course. So I would say to my husband, I'm going to be late home from work on this day. I'm going to be meeting with Linda, having coffee with Linda, which was true because Linda was the pastor's wife. So I had to lie, but make it seem like I wasn't lying. And so I was building an awareness of God and who God is, who Jesus is. But that first year where I couldn't tell my husband that I'd come to Christ, I used to walk on the beach every morning and say to God, please make me into the wife my husband needs. That's what my prayer was, because I thought, I'm doing something wrong. As a Christian, I thought, I've got to stay married because that's what God wants. God hates divorce. This was all the scriptures I was reading, but I hadn't gotten the awareness that God really loves me and he would never want anyone that I was involved with, especially my husband, to hurt me the way my husband hurt me and terrorized me and my kids. So I was praying for about a year for God to make me into the sort of wife my husband needed. And I came to Christ in 2010. 2011, we had a cyclone in Queensland, Cyclone Yasi. It's like a hurricane that you guys have, really severe cyclone. And the week before, we were all preparing for it. And my ex-husband had a back operation and he was recovering. But instead of, deciding just to take his pills and for pain relief and being, looking after himself, he decided he would smoke some pot, take some pills, drink some alcohol. Anyway, the night that was happening was a terrible night, and I do talk about it a bit in the book. Terrible abuse to me, to the kids, and I'd put the girls to bed, so they would have been 13 and 15 at that time. I'd put them to bed and I thought, well, he's quiet because we had a 2-story house, so he's downstairs. And I thought, there's a bit of respite here. We can, I can go to bed. Anyway, so the kids were in bed and all of a sudden he rang me from his phone, rang my phone upstairs. And no, he came upstairs. Yeah, he come upstairs and he started punching holes in the wall and said, get the kids out of bed. So they're sitting on the couch. He's punching holes in the wall. And this is one of the times I touched on where I demonic activity is real. Demons are real. my husband wasn't saved, and I remember seeing him probably 6 foot away from me, punching holes in the wall, and then all of a sudden it is like he flew across the room, actually flew. I remember looking at him, and his eyes were very, very dark, and I just looked at him and like absolutely the worst nightmare. And then he punched me in the face, actually punched me. And I remember my face kind of exploding. It was all like it was in slow motion. The kids are on the couch, and God's voice, because usually up to that point, God's voice was very still and small, but it was like thunder. And he goes, "This stops now." Just those 3 words. And I remember turning, and everything sped up, and I turned, ran down the stairs. I left my kids there, but which I look back and I think, why would I have left my kids there? But they were okay. I ran next door, and the neighbours were there, and then we went to a refuge that night. And I realised then, after that was God delivering me. So he did not want me to stay in that marriage, and there was absolutely no doubt that the marriage had ended because of God's voice speaking to me that way. So the prayer that I had prayed, make me into the sort of wife my husband needs, it was like God solved that situation in a completely different way to what I thought or expected he would. Yeah, so the marriage ended then, and then it took me another 5 years to actually divorce my husband. And that's a whole other story in itself, because domestic violence, there is just so much in domestic violence, and it's just so hard to get out of. It affects any sort of person, can affect men and women, any demographic, any age group. It's just so insidious and so trapping and soul destroying that any woman in domestic violence or man, it's just so hard to get out of. And I'm just so thankful that God spoke to me so clearly and got me out of that situation.
Yeah. That was like the most powerful moment in the book. I mean, I was just, it was difficult to read about your marriage. That was, I mean, goodness, God bless you for real. I mean, you are a survivor. I mean, it's
but that's God, Samuel. Yeah, but that's God, That's God. You look at anyone in the Bible and people like in our world now, but all the people in the Bible, they're all broken, fallen people who had incredible things, obstacles, and and God uses all of us, and God will be glorified. That's the whole. He will be glorified. So if he has that plan for your life, and he has you, then you can survive. I survived anything, I think, because I knew, looking back, I could see God's fingerprints all over my life, whereas at the time going through the situations, I didn't,
Yeah.
And everything and every part of pain that I've had in my life, God has used that for his glory. Like all of those books that I wrote, it's all the pain he's used to transform my life. He's given me beauty for ashes. I could never have imagined the extent or magnitude of what God has done in my life. I could never have imagined it. I could never have known that that's God. The creator of the universe loves each of us, every single one of us. He loves us fiercely and wants us to be saved.
Yeah, it reminds me of Joseph. He was
Joseph
almost died, winds up in jail, and he kind of fixes things with his brothers. He said, what you meant was for bad, God meant for good. I mean, it was just it's incredible how God can use pain and things that the ugliness in our life and actually use that for good. It's unbelievable.
And one of the most powerful scriptures in the Bible is it's 2 Timothy 1:7, I think. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. And that spirit of fear is not from God. So all of us and the people in the Bible, can you imagine all those parts of their life, the things they went through? They would have felt incredible amounts of fear. But God has not given us the spirit of fear. So the fear comes from the enemy. But with God, we can get through those situations, but it's just not collapsing into that fear and letting us paralyze us so that we can never move beyond it. Yeah.
Yeah. God, when you share that story about God speaking to you, I just felt the compassion of a father speaking to his daughter and saying, listen, this is it. Did you hear that in your head, or did you hear that in the room?
It was probably a bit of both. It was like everywhere. It was like this loudest voice. I can't really even describe it. It was just like powerful. It was like a vibration. And just the gap between each word. This stops now. And then everything just sped back up again. And it's like, it was just like watching a movie. Yeah, it was just probably one of the most profound moments of my life, because I knew in that instant, God is real. He's real. He's here.
Yeah, you heard his voice. I asked that because, I mean, obviously, he was speaking to you, but I thought if your husband, he could have been speaking to your husband as well. So I was just curious if he would have reacted to it.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. I've never really even thought about that, because he stopped and I ran. Yeah, it was really, it was just like, everything sped up, and it's like we all did what we did. And my younger daughter said to me, because she said later, as soon as I ran down those stairs, it's like he snapped out of it. And he said, oh, what's your mother done now? So It's like he just snapped out of it, and he said to my daughter, go over and get her. So he went from being like demon-possessed, like mad, punching me, to like cool, calm and collected. What's your mother done now? Go and get her. So maybe he heard, I've never asked him that, if he heard God say that too, but
well,
God was in that room, so...
seemed like he was in his right mind. It seems like if he was demonically possessed, and you already established how active that demon was with him, obviously the way he moved, the look in his eyes. Yeah. And God himself comes, and it's almost like he commanded that demon, this stops now. So whether he would have heard it or recalled it, clearly God was coming and rescuing you from a real live entity in power. And it's remarkable.
Yeah, it is. That's good. Incredible.
I love that story.
Yeah.
I hate that you had to go through that. But it's just an incredible story of God's goodness. As like you said, you were in a totally different space as far as how to handle it. And that just gave you that clarity, that peace to know that you didn't have to stay married to him.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked about the messed up periods in the Bibles. I love that so much because it's so true. We don't really think about that. We tend to kind of put these characters from the Bible on pedestals and think of them as, they are heroes, but they're all broken as well. And so, it just goes to show you that God uses us in the real world. He doesn't pick someone who's all, and really, if you look at Saul, who changed his name to Paul, it was, I think in one of his epistles, he thought it was that very reason why God chose him, is because he was, the one who was out there just with a zeal against the church and Christians and Christ himself, as he said when he was converted. So, it just goes to show you that God's going to use us despite of our weaknesses, which is so cool.
Yes. And he does that, like, that's so he can be glorified, so he can get the credit,
Yes.
which is
yes.
very reassuring. It's very reassuring. It's like kind of lets us off the hook a bit if we're obedient. Okay, do what he wants us to do, it's very hard, but it's a reassuring thing. It's like, well, he's got this covered, so I can just relax.
Yeah.
And I can just do what he wants me to do. Once I got over stuff like with writing and so forth, because the enemy would often say to me, "Oh, who's going to read your books?" And I was like, "Well, I don't care. I'm writing them because God wants me to write them, and then, the rest takes care of itself, however God wants it to happen, it's like it's very reassuring to have a God who will equip us and help us, but we've got to be willing and get past that fear and that pride of thinking, oh, who are we to serve God, because there's a bit of pride in there. It's like, no, humble yourself. It's okay. I've asked you to do this. Just do it,
Yeah.
So,
That's fantastic.
yeah.
Well, I got to say, I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
I will put a link to your book in the show notes for anyone that's interested can pick it up and read it. Such an incredible story. So I invite you to share it. If you have a website, share it and let people know where they can get your books, and just share any final thoughts, and you can close us out in prayer.
Yeah, sure. So just one other thing I just wanted to touch upon quickly that I used to do when I was in New Age is yoga. So I write a bit about yoga in the book, and I find a lot of Christians, they'll say, "Oh, what's wrong with doing yoga?" But, what I found with yoga and the origins of yoga is the meaning of yoga means yoke. Okay, so intrinsic in the DNA of yoga is yoking ourselves to other gods, right? And it's Exodus 23, you shall have no other God before me. And Jesus talks about him being our yoke. It's Matthew 11, take my yoke. So I always have a caution for people, Christians doing yoga, in that it's not just stretching, it's actually opening that doorway where you're actually inviting other gods in. Like it's fine to do stretches and things, but yoga itself, there are many gods, and they're all to do with those different poses. Each of the poses is saluting a different god. So that's really the only other thing I wanted to talk about. The root of yoga is being yoked to other gods. So, I know there's Christian people say, oh, but there's Christian yoga. Well, there's really not Christian yoga. Yoga is yoga. You can do stretching. That's a different thing. When you do those poses, there's a whole root that intrinsically you bind yourself to. Yeah.
Wow. So, thank you for sharing that.
That's okay. And I've got a website, and it's www.meredithswift.org. So there's stuff on there about my books, and I've got a bit of a blog. I'm a bit slack with my blog lately. I think I need to do a bit more of my blogging. It's just time management. But people are welcome to contact me if they'd like to. I always love talking about my testimony and coming out of the New Age. Because there's a much bigger world in Christ than there could ever be in the New Age.
Amen.
And thank you, Samuel, for inviting me on the podcast. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks for coming on. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I'll close in prayer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Heavenly Father, our precious Jesus, Lord, we just thank you and we praise your name for this time that I've had with Samuel, and to all the listeners. I thank you for Samuel and his ministry, which glorifies you and brings, some different sorts of ways of looking at scripture and different people. And Lord, I just thank you for his open heart and his willingness. And Lord, I pray that our conversation today has touched hearts and open minds, and cause people to think about their lives and just how big you are, Lord, just how you can handle anything, just how you are the creator and the one who loves us just so fiercely that he laid down his life and you died for us on that cross, Lord. So I thank you, Lord, I just ask that all those who are watching be blessed in your holy name. And I thank you again for this opportunity to serve you, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to share this with somebody you know. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, leave us a rating and review. You can email me at theweirdchristianpodcast@gmail.com. And with that being said, we'll catch you on the next one.